Stories are meant to uplift, illuminate, and serve as a bridge into the vast possibilities of our imagination. But what happens when these stories are watered down from its deep roots and are manufactured and rebranded for mainstream consumption? This is the dilemma of our time, where fairy tale stories have lost its value in society and have been reduced down to just mere entertainment. That is what we mean by Disneyfication. So let's first begin by defining this very interesting term of Disneyfication. The Cambridge Dictionary defines it as the process of changing something so that it entertains or is attractive in a safe and controlled way. So this term implies something that is cartoonish, something that is not to be taken seriously, and it is just mere entertainment. There are many companies that capitalize on this enchanting power of Disneyfication. In fact, the term comes from the Disney Corporation, which thrives on this model of entertainment. In fact, Tolkien critiqued Walt Disney as being corrupt. In a letter that he wrote to a fan in 1964, he wrote, "I recognize Walt Disney's talent, but it has always seemed to me hopelessly corrupted. Though in most of the pictures proceeding from his studios, they are admirable or charming passages, the effect of all of them to me is disgusting. Some have given me nausea." There are many things that Tolkien didn't like, and Walt Disney's productions was one of them. In fact, he wrote about this topic in his essay on fairy stories, in which he tries to explain the rules of how to properly construct a fairy tale story. And one of them, a foundational principle, is that if one is to use comedy or cartoonish effects, it has to be in service of the story, not just as a simple tool to just offer a good laugh, because that takes away from the essence of the fairy tale. Tolkien's fairy story of The Hobbit was released to the public in 1937, the same year that the first movie adaptation of Snow White was released on theaters. There are two common links between these two works. First, they both draw from the fairy tale tradition, which Disney borrowed from the Grimm's brothers' collection of stories. And two is the characters of the dwarves. Now, these dwarves are differently depicted in both of these stories. In Snow White, the dwarves are depicted as comical and amusing. But in Tolkien's Hobbit story, dwarves are serious warriors on a mission to recapture their long-lost treasure through battling a dragon. Now, although Tolkien himself had some very specific rules as to how true fairy tale stories were to be portrayed, he himself, as he was learning his art, as he was discovering his art, he made some errors that later on he would disapprove of. So, for example, in the story of The Hobbit, he included some comical, almost Disneyfied scenes in that story, as, for example, the talking purse, which really didn't provide anything to the story other than a moment of a funny experience. Which later on in his essay on fairy stories, he didn't point directly at that particular case, but he did note that, that is not the proper way of writing fairy tale stories. If one is to include comedy or things that are childish or amusing, they have to be in service of the story. They have to be done in a skillful manner that will not distract you from the underlying energy of the story, right? And that is one of the main differences between the Disneyfied versions of fairy tale stories compared to fairy tales which Tolkien very specifically had rules for. Now, for us as adults, we can clearly see by reflecting on our childhood memories that although we were entertained by these Disney stories or Disneyfied versions of stories, we really didn't learn much from them, right? We didn't really acquire skills or learn anything about what life was going to bring ahead, right? And on the basis of understanding that these stories come from a deeper tradition of mythical fairy tale stories that are told not just for entertainment but to offer guidance and advice as to how we are going to navigate our various different roads in life. So as adults, one of the things that we must do is figure out ways to tell better stories and to do it in a way that they are entertaining but also educational, and also at the same time they offer possibilities and open new doors.